and big steps in the transformation themselves. This platform has been founded in 2020. And there's also a short video, a short slideshow actually about this platform Partners for Sustainability. We will watch it right now.
Unendlich. Nicht opuścić.
Okay, thank you very much. Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz, very easy. Supply Chain Due Diligence Act. This new act is about the duty of care in your own supply chains. The law aims to strengthen the protection of human rights and environment in these supply chains. Of course, everyone thinks that is right and necessary. Economy, society, and politics. However, companies have certain fears, an unbelievable increase in administrative work and costs, and thereby a threat to international competitiveness and also a displacement of already very careful European companies from foreign markets. This will also have to be discussed. What we want to achieve with this workshop today is to improve the information available on this law, on this German law in the Czech Republic. What can you expect? What can companies expect? What do you have to expect from your suppliers? What can you expect from your suppliers who do business with German companies, etc., etc. We are very happy to have a top speaker on this topic today, very supporting partner, Frank Ebinger. Frank is a professor in the field of sustainability-oriented innovation and transformation management at the Nuremberg campus of technology at the Technical University at Nuremberg. He's also a member of the board of directors of the Committee for Environmental Verification and a member of the working group of the National Contact Point for the OECD guidelines at the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. And also, I'm happy that afterwards, Mariana Kellerova, Senior Manager Corporate Communications at Siemens, will inform us briefly about Siemens' approach in terms of supply chains and the new act. And then, of course, there's a space for your questions and hopefully also for some answers. So let's jump directly into Frank Ebinger. The floor is yours, Frank, please.
Thank you, Christian. So I try to share now my screen with you. Let's see whether I can make it. There it is. I hope you can you see my presentation?
Yes.
I will start the presentation itself. So I hope you can see it. I would like to use this opportunity, and thank you for the invitation to talk a bit about the new German Supply Chain Act. So I would try to look in my agenda or on my contribution on the context of the German Act on corporate due diligence, the German Act itself. And I would like to put some short outlook towards the European level. And the starting point is just to have a better understanding from where this discussion comes and where it's rooted in. So if we think about and if we discuss about this Due Diligence Act, it came at least from an economic movement, which we can say it's since 20 years all around the globe existing, the liberalization of trade and the associated globalization processes. They have completely changed significantly the global competition, the competition between companies, and even the customer expectations, because customers get everything what is produced somewhere at some spot in the world. And if we look, and sorry for that, it is in German. If we look on the consequences, we can see on the left-hand side the traditional value chains was usually look like this. One company produces, starting from the raw materials, everything in-house. Later on, in between, in the late 90s, it started to be a bit more fragmented. And nowadays, we have at least a complete fragmented value chain with at least one agent, maybe one OEM, original manufacturer, which just put the label on products and sell it to the market with a name. But the production itself, it's somewhere all around the world, and it's produced under certain conditions, in conditions like low wages, hardly any safety environmental standards are used in some of the countries, some inadequate tax and duty administration, and in some cases we have even corrupt state structures. So this led to certain human right violations and risks for the companies, at least. And here I brought along from the World Business Council of Sustainable Development a study which shows on the timeline certain events of human rights violations and other risks to companies. But the most crucial and very sad example is the Rana Plaza in Bangladesh on the 24th of April in 2013. The building collapsed, and there were some thousand people, more than 1,000 people dead and 2,500 injured. And the question was, who is responsible for that now? This collapse of the building, and there was a long discussion who is responsible. Are that the textile companies who produced there and delivered the textiles, the finished textiles, then to companies like Benetton or some others? Is Benetton now responsible for that? So this question was raised, and even that fell into a certain political discussion on due diligence in human rights due diligence on the level of the United Nations. And in 2011, the United Nations brought up guiding principles on business and human rights issues, and mentioned the due diligence as a certain approach which should be implemented into value chains operated by companies, and try to develop certain measures in order to tackle these human rights issues and even the human rights risks and even some environmental risk in the value chains. This due diligence approach from the UN was adopted in 2016 in Germany, and we had there a German National Action Plan on business and human rights, which we called NAP. I don't want to go in detail to that, but the baseline was the UN Guiding Principles, which was launched in 2011, and Germany followed these approaches and saw or established 5 core elements, which the government of Germany, so to say, put in the center of the discussion. So companies should declare principles in order to respect human rights. They should develop procedures for identifying actual and potential adverse impacts on human rights. They should take measures in order to address these issues, report about it, and complain and introduce a complaint mechanism. So these 5 steps was given to the discussion, and the government put it on the level of the companies and asked to implement it. But after that 2016 paper on that national action plan, nothing happened really. So the government checked it whether in 2018 was some measures taken by companies, but there was nearly only few companies who took that serious, and they checked it again in 2019-20, and came then to the agreement in the government that nothing has happened in the companies, and now they want to set up a law based on the Due Diligence Act or NAP. So to understand how we can set laws in an international setup like value chains, it's really difficult. And I just brought along some framework for due diligence because On the international level, we have no law possibility to set laws, to set regulations. We have just the opportunity to set certain voluntary standards. On the European level, we can set regulations. On the national level, we can set regulations, and we have a fourth level. We can set contractual agreements. These are the four pillars of legal frameworks which we have in our hand. But on the level of international discussion, we mostly is based on voluntary standards and codes of conduct. And usually the duty holders retain a considerable degree of autonomy and flexibility in fulfilling their obligations. So this is a bit vague, and it's very difficult to set certain rules. So, and that was the reason. There is some sound. Could you switch off your microphones, please? Thank you very much. Thank you. And I brought just along certain voluntary standards they are longly existing, like the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, the OECD guidelines on multinational enterprises. The ILO has a tripartite declaration of principles concerning multinational enterprises and social policy. We have standards like the ISO 26000 on the responsibility of organizations, the ISO 14001, for example, on environmental management. So we have already a lot of standards, but they are not taken into account in order to increase the due diligence approaches in the value chain. And that was the reason that Germany started now to think about a smart mix approach in corporate social responsibility, because corporate social responsibility until now it's completely not really put into a law structure. So they thought about a smart mix approach. On the one hand side, we have these voluntary standards. On the other hand side, we have the opportunity to set a certain legal framework on the national level or European level. And now they discuss about to combine both in order to develop a kind of smart mix. And I think we can see on our law, on the German law, it's a kind of smart mix approach, which takes into consideration voluntary standards into the legal structure. And if we look on the certain legal discussion, even on the European level, we can find these idea in different CSR laws. For example, the conflict minerals regulation, which is since 2020 put into the German legislation. We have the CSR directive. We have the Shareholders' Right Directive. We have the European Union Taxonomy Regulation, the Packaging Act, and even now the German Supply Chain Law. So you can see that we have a certain agreement in the international field that CSR needs to be somehow regulated in a certain law on a certain law level. And if you look on the national regulations on human rights issues, you can find already on the national level in France, the French duty of vigilance law, the Dutch child labor due diligence law, for example, the Italian legislative decree, which incorporates corporate liability for crimes, including human rights abuses and environmental crimes, the UK Modern Slavery Act, the Australia Modern Slavery Act, and even some more. I put along this. I put on this slide just to show you that there is a bunch of different laws existing. So, having said that, so it's very difficult to regulate this this due diligence approach along supply chains, the German government decided to start this discussion and try to develop a kind of
You know
approach.
what's behind now, yeah?
Sorry, is there? Sorry. Okay, so the German Supply Check Act is in place since or agreed since June 2021, and it has certain key points. The law is intended to cover companies, bigger companies, for the first run until 2023. It addresses German companies which have more than 3,000 employees. In later stages, and a year later, it's even smaller companies, but still very big companies addressed with 1,000 employees. The principle of this law is to think about to empower the partners in the supply chain before you retreat. So that means companies should seek for solutions together with the partners in order to protect people and the environment together with the suppliers. So it's a kind of cooperational approach where whole supply chains should work together in order to overcome the issues. The defined corporate due diligence obligations are derived from the UN guiding principles. So you see, it's still in the history of that UN guiding principles, and the obligation to establish a supply chain related risk management, which is addressed in that law, is you should determine risk, analyze these risks, take appropriate preventive and remedial measures. That means based on your individual case, you should take appropriate preventive and remedial measures. What appropriate means, I will tell you later on. If termination of relations are not possible because maybe you have a supplier which violates the rule, but you are completely dependent on it, you have to see how to overcome or how to minimize the violation together with your partner, with your supplier. So that the law doesn't mean that you should terminate immediately the contract with your suppliers, even though if your suppliers violate the rules, but you should take up measures, you should take up communication with the supplier and try to overcome these issues. You should review it and review the effectiveness of your measures. You should establish a complaint mechanism. That means you should be open to your stakeholders in order to receive complaints from the civil society, for example, from NGOs, from partner organizations. And you should report transparently and publicly about it. And in the law, there is as well a kind of control mechanism. While doing your risk management, you should report every year to the Federal Office of Economics and Export Control, which is monitoring your compliance and due diligence obligations based on your report. And if some serious violations of the law should occurs, either you don't hand in on time your report, or the report is just very vague and not very depth declared, then the federal office could also exclude you from awarding public contracts, for example, as a kind of negative reaction of not complying with the regulation. Intentional or negligent violations of the due diligence obligation, you can even receive a fine up to 2% of the average annual turnover. So you see, there is a law bound together, where the major responsibility lies in the risk management approach, and within your obligation, within your sphere of influence, while on the other hand side you have a kind of monitoring approach which follows your work, and even has some teeth in order to give you some negative impact on your results if you don't follow the law already. Just to mention 9 levels, what you have to fulfill, just to describe a bit the risk management approach which you have to fulfill. So 9 levels are, or 9 steps are described in the law. You have to establish a risk management. You have to have an internally a human rights representative. You have to conduct a risk analysis. You have to give a policy statement about your obligations. You have to prevent measures with your own company and with direct suppliers, remedial actions to conduct, compliance procedure to establish measures in indirect suppliers if it's needed, and the documentation. I'm coming now for each step just to give you a short insight. I don't can go very much in detail, but just to have a short overview of it. So risk management, you have to identify social and environmental risks, prevent, minimize violations of human rights and environmental obligations. So you ask yourself maybe, what is a risk in that area? And I put here some topics from the CSR risk checker. This is a platform which you can consult as a company in order to get a better understanding what kind of different risks you are in your sector, in your maybe in your geographical location, or even as a company itself. So you have at least four risks in the field of fair business practices, for example, taxation, corruption, market distortion, in the labor rights, freedom of association, or discrimination in gender, wage, remuneration, and so on. The human rights and ethics, like conflict and security, land use and property rights. And on the environmental level, you have biodiversity, for example. But in the law, there is mainly addressed water issues and the use of chemicals. So just to give you an idea where you can get some more information, what kind of risks you are in, you can consult here the MVO risk checker, and go individually for your company based on your description. Go into detail and check whether you have a certain human rights risk, for example. So once you have developed this risk management, then you have to set up or to announce a human rights representative, which is responsible then for the regular information structure on the management. Then you have to conduct a risk analysis, for example, based on the CV on the NVO risk checker. You can analyze your risks, your identified risk, whether it's a high risk, it's a low risk, whether it's a serious one or not. You have to set up your policy statements on human rights strategy. You have to set up to the identified risks certain preventive measures. You have to remedial actions in order to overcome these risks. And you have then either together with some partner companies on the sector level, or individually to set up a complaints procedure where you receive certain complaints from civil society or from other stakeholders. You have to develop maybe indirect measures. What this is, I tell you in a second. And you have to document all that, what you have done in terms of management structure, in terms of risk identification and risk analysis. So these are basically the actions you should do. But how far should you go in your analysis? And if you see a simple model of this value chain here, it's a computer value chain, for example. You can see the old approach was your believed responsibility is maybe goes to your supplier, tier 1, because you have a contractual agreement with the supplier, and to the wholesaler or to the retailer. It depends a bit on you if you are a company which sells B2B or B2C. But the idea of this law is that your sphere of influence is much broader, much more in depth, and that is the reason why the law differentiate 4 levels of risk assessment and due diligence. You start within the law. You start with your own management, with your own company, and you should develop an effective risk management on your own location for relevant business processes, with the appropriate measures to identify, minimize, and terminate risks and breaches. That you do with your human rights officer, which you have implemented. But in the law is also foreseen that your own business units, domestic and abroad, should also do a risk analysis, because they are part of your company. And therefore, you have to develop as well for your own business units and domestic and on domestic and abroad the same structure as you do it for your own location in Germany. And the third level is then you have to do with your partners, with your worldwide direct suppliers, the tier 1 suppliers, doing the same thing like you did within your company. You have to do risk analysis. You have to develop prevention mechanisms while you do supplier selection, while you develop contractual assurances, while you do some trainings, control mechanisms like audits, and so on. And once you have identified there some issues, you have to do immediately action and try to terminate either the contract or to plan for termination, or to minimize at least the issues within your supplier structure. As I said, this law is not intended that you should terminate all risky contractual agreements within the companies, but you should develop with your partners together solutions. So, and the 4th level there, this is something which I mentioned with the issue of this sphere of influence, the broader sphere of influence. Once you have to do that mandatory, the three levels. This is part of the mandatory approach, and you have to report it to the office. But once there is some additional information, for example, if there is substantial knowledge that even an event-related risk is far down in your supply chain, be it that an NGO gives you some insights about a certain mining issue of some raw materials which are used in your product, you have to look more in depth and try to develop a risk analysis towards this level of supply chain, whether it be on tier 3 or 5 or 6. You have to follow that that knowledge driven understanding. So you have to develop then as well prevention against some violations and to do some actions. That means you have to fulfill the 3 levels for sure. In some cases where you get some substantiated knowledge about some events in your deeper supply chain, then you have to follow even the 4th level, but only on that supply chain issue. So at least in order to organize yourself in the light of the law, you have to bring people together: management, human rights officers, purchasing department, compliance department, legal department, CSR department, and even the complaints procedure with stakeholders. You have to look into your processes like the regular risk analysis up to complaint procedures or documentations, reporting, and so on. So you have to go through all your processes and check whether you have already certain bits and pieces already existing in your company, and have to put the picture in a different way in order to fulfill the requirements. And you have a lot of documents already in your company, policy statements, action plans, supplier approval processes, even rules of procedures, how you deal with complaints, and so on and so forth. So you have at least a certain level of people, processes, and documents already in your company, and you have to just to reorganize these things together in order to fulfill the law. So maybe you as a supplier, maybe you have no headquarter in Germany, because then you are under the companies who have to fulfill these requirements completely. Maybe you are either a direct supplier or you are an indirect supplier. The companies in Germany, and that is what you can expect in your country. The companies in Germany, they will conduct this law. They will have to follow this law, and mainly if you are a direct supplier to a German company, you will get some duties passed on. For example, you have to make your own risk analysis based on that what I have said. Maybe you have to participate in prevention measures. Maybe you have to participate in remedial actions, or you have to collect supply information and develop it and send it to your company, to your customer, to your customer. So everything is controlled by the customer, and the customer, the companies will address it within your company. So this is something which you have to see anyway. So, and now a short outlook. I spoke a lot on the German Due Diligence Act, but there is a Due Diligence Act under discussion on the European level as well. So once it's just on the national level, and it will have an impact on you as a supplying company, on the European level, it will even affect you directly. So there is a discussion currently ongoing that from 250 employees, companies with 250 employees, in addition SMEs that are listed or active in high risk areas, for example, they have to fulfill this European Due Diligence Act. In this Due Diligence Act, there is even the civil law liability extension in it. So you can even court to court in order to that stakeholders suit you on the court level, and there is even including environmental issues, while in the German Due Diligence Act, it's still mostly with human rights issues. On the European level, there will be as well environmental standards and environmental issues be included in that European Due Diligence Act. So there is something coming up. And anyway, I just want to emphasize and stop with one sentence. There is already a movement ongoing, and the more early you step on that movement, on that wave, and try to follow this structures, the structural procedures, the earlier you are ready and ready for the international competition on that level. And I think that is something that you should take into consideration and be ready for the future. And now I'm eager to listening to my colleague and look how Siemens is doing. Please.
Yes, thank you very much, Frank. It's me, it's not Mariana. For a second, Mariana, just give me a second for a question we have in the chat. Because I think this is a question we all have, and I have written it down here during your presentation, Frank. The question is any help, because it's so much administration is coming towards the companies. Is there any examples, digital tools, samples of reports that companies can use, or small and medium size especially? Is there any help for the companies to fulfill these regulations? Just a brief answer, please, because then Mariana can elaborate.
Yeah, there is the help desk in Germany existing. They speak as well English, and the human rights help desk can help companies, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. They are ready for receiving questions and try to give some answers to it, and help and manuals and even support. So there is a structure existing, and there is a lot of different from all sectoral associations. There are guidelines already existing. We could collect it, and maybe you from the AHK, you can develop a kind of link list and something like, in order to help your small and medium-sized enterprises in Czech. To support them what to do and how to do. But I think Mariana will tell us how you do it in practice, or what kind of challenges you're facing at the moment.
Okay, I'm just probably trying to start the presentation sharing, but as always, this is not as easy as one would expect. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, I'll leave it in this mode, because if I try to move to the full screen mode, then we will not cease seeing it at all. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you how Siemens is going about the sustainability in the supply chain, which, as I discovered today, is one of the longest words in German, to my surprise. So at Siemens globally, we have about 65,000 suppliers coming from more than 140 countries around the globe, so that's quite a chunk. So managing the sustainable aspects in this whole supply chain is not an easy task. Just to give you some figures, in our last fiscal year, the turnover with the suppliers exceeded 27 billion euros, and basically our business with our suppliers makes about half of our total revenue. So that's not a small thing to take care of. And we at Siemens take something what we call holistic approach to our supply chain. And we basically follow 3 simple steps, and that is to prevent, to detect, and to respond to anything what could possibly happen in our supply chain. And I can tell you that there is always something going on in it. The principles that we put in place are based on the UN Global Compact, and then are translated to something that we called our business conduct guidelines, which is something that is obligatory to follow not only for our suppliers, but also to all of our employees. I'm trying to get to, okay, here we go. So what we look at and what are the areas that our business conduct guidelines cover, first of all, and most importantly, is the legal compliance. All of our suppliers have to be compliant with the legislation, no question about it. Corruption and bribery, very sensitive topic to Siemens. This is also a top priority on our radar. Fair competition, antitrust, and the latter is even more important, intellectual property rights. Conflicts of interest, respect for human rights of employees, of course, prohibition of child labor, health and safety for employees, extremely important point, environmental protection, transparency in the supply chain. We also expect our suppliers to be responsible for their suppliers, our sub-suppliers, subcontractors. And of course, responsible mineral sourcing is also on our radar. When we look at the risks, because we cannot control everything, we focus on whether it is a high-risk country. If you ask me, is Czech Republic a high-risk country? No, it isn't. We very closely focus on the responsible mineral sourcing and on the area of the conflict minerals, because even though they are not the biggest part of what we produce, we still produce minerals that can be subject to this question. What is gaining of importance is the CO2 footprint of the products or the services that we buy. Of course, it is the question of hazardous substances that can be in the products we buy. And a very important one is the construction business. Anyone who has ever built a garage knows that any construction site can be extremely dangerous to people who work there. So we take great care that this is something that is covered. If we have a look at the numbers about what we actually do, in the last fiscal year, our suppliers took 4,759 self-assessment audits. These are quite thorough activities. We, as a partner, made 374 on-site supplier quality audits. These are very, very extensive looks into how our suppliers are doing, and 269 sustainability audits were carried by independent third parties. If you ask me about the reporting mechanism, we have an in-house ombudsperson, and we also have an external one to make sure that everyone feels safe, all of those who want to whistleblow anything. And we really encourage our suppliers, our employees, our sub-suppliers to, in good faith, report any areas that might be a question to further investigation. I was specifically asked to cover the question of non-compliance or the consequences for non-adherence. When we find out there is something going on that is not in line with our business conduct guidelines, we mutually try to agree on corrective action, and we always try to make sure that there is a reasonable time frame. Not that we say, okay, you have to fix something, the supplier says, yes, we will fix it, and that's it. In case there is inability or maybe even unwillingness to comply, we may phase out the business relationship with that particular supplier. Since 2015, we have a new system which is called the Central Warning Message, and this allows us to act faster and more effectively to major breakages, including worldwide blocking of that particular supplier. Now, Siemens is not only a very strict supervisor of adherence to our business conduct guidelines, we also try to help our suppliers with the sustainability issues that we see as pressing, important, and crucial for their operations. So lately we have introduced a system which is called the Carbon Reduction and Suppliers concept. And that concept is designed to support our suppliers in their target setting and action plans for reducing their climate footprints. We have an interactive web page where they can go and regarding the business they are in, be it manufacturing, be it logistics, be it service, we may show them where would be the areas where they could look for opportunities to cut their carbon footprint. And as Siemens is one of the companies who are leading this particular area, we have a lot of experience to share, and we are very happy and very willing to share it with our suppliers. So that was the short trip to Siemens business conduct guidelines and supply chain management. These are the links, and I will put them into the discussion of this meeting. All information is publicly available, and those of you who want to have a look at how, for example, the carbon calculation works, you can try it on our website. Thanks for having the opportunity to share this.
Thank you very much, Mariana Kellerova, Senior Manager Corporate Communications, Siemens. Thank you very much. This was very important, I think, as Frank already announced, to get an insight into your supply chain management, into your risk management, into the steps you are taking when there is something happening which you accept as Siemens. So thank you very much, both of you. Now we have very little bit of time left for questions. So please, now's the time.
Christian, while the people think about questions, I just want to share another information. There are certain IT software systems which you can use in order to develop a kind of approach for your own company. I don't want to make advertisements here. There is a lot of companies. We have identified 50 different companies which has certain opportunities, but also some issues. For example, there are some platform solutions where every supplier can share the information on the platform with the original manufacturer, and this original manufacturer has then everything at hand on this platform. For example, we have blockchain solutions and others which we can use for that approach. I suggest you maybe to develop a kind of workshop maybe in your country, a one-day workshop in order to have different options on the table and discuss it with the partner companies. That is maybe a good opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. This is of course, this is the first step into this topic. All the companies listening to us and being our guests today, they are dealing with the problem already, of course. There's almost no company active here in Europe that is not familiar to this problem or this issue. But of course, there are new regulations coming up, as you said, and it would be very helpful to get a deeper insight into this topic, also into the help desk mechanism and the, let's say, digital solutions and tools to deal with this. Transparency is the key word for everything. Yes.
I work at the moment with two companies together in order to develop organizational approaches. So it's a stepwise process. Maybe Mariana, you see it the same in Siemens, because you have to check what you have already within your company, what kind of puzzle parts you have already, and then you have to start your risk assessment. For example, we started now to look on the IT level of these two companies in order to gain all the information about the first tier suppliers, the volume, maybe in which areas they work, do they have a certain label structure and the like, and the certification schemes and so on. This is the first step, and then we go the next step and try to check whether they are at risk or not, and so on and so forth. So it's a stepwise approach, and this we could develop together in a workshop, for example, how to do that.
Yes.
Yes. Let me just add that many companies have a lot of information available.
Yeah.
It's in many cases it's just a question of putting it all together.
Yeah.
And we at Siemens believe that digitalization is one of the best approaches to take, because then you can interconnect all the pieces of the puzzle. Of course, blockchain is a very promising technology in this very area. It can bring more transparency into the supply chain management. Those weaker parts in the chain can get more strength, more power, and of course the final product is absolutely traceable. So then the products become much more safe and much more reliable. So yes, the technology is advancing, and the supply chain management definitely is an area where it can be used.
We have another question. David Wagenknecht, do you think the new legal measures might temporarily provide additional pressure on supply chains already burdened by COVID-related complications, for instance, longer delivery times, etc.? I think it's a matter of time. The law will have an impact in the year of 2023. Is that right?
Yeah, but I don't think that this will have a huge impact on the pressure within the value chains, because it's a collaborative approach, and you can really develop the measures with your suppliers. So it has some positive impact as well, because you have to take up the contact with your suppliers and develop with them. Of course, if you have thousands of suppliers like Siemens, it's quite difficult then to manage everything on a bilateral level. But on the other hand side, maybe with the bigger suppliers, you can start and develop a certain rules which you maybe have already, but you can deepen the relations with them as well. So I don't think that there is a huge negative impact. I guess it's even it's the same or even a better supply chain structure, a resilience which you can develop.
Absolutely, and in the supply chain, the most pressure comes from your customers and the end consumers. And I think that all those systems and digital solutions help us companies to really prove to our customers and consumers what we are really doing, and we can substantiate our existence on the market. It's a key thing.
Please give us, this was a very important aspect, please give us your statement on two things. Is the international competitiveness in danger by this act, by this law? Could it happen that this displacement of companies, European companies, let's say, and let's say Chinese companies crashing into the country and taking over the business there? Is that a risk? The second question is, when we talk about risk management, that means what do companies risk, who or which don't do everything like the Act is telling to do?
Yeah, I think internationally business is always risky. So first of all, so you can never say everything is safe. So in every day you have to renew contractual agreements and to work with companies together. So, but if it comes now to the level of China versus Europe or America, of course there is a competition. It's ongoing, and but this will not be driven by that kind of law. It's driven by completely different mechanisms, and this law will once it is on the European level implemented, I think it will create a level playing field on the one of the biggest markets in the world, in Europe. So I think there is a kind of clear competition in Europe of every companies operating in Europe, either operating in Europe, producing in Europe, or exporting into the European Union. So if you look on the law on the European level, also producers from outside who wants to sell in European Union markets, they have to respect all that regulations. So that means I don't think that this will have a negative impact on the competition, but it will have an impact on the structural approaches within the countries where the production at the moment is. So that would be my answer.
Mm-hmm. Marianne, thank you.
Well, we as companies, we have something that is called reputation or the license to operate, and compliance with such legislation just fosters these aspects for us. So as Professor Ebinger said, you see, I don't think there is any danger for those who really care about not only about what they do, but also about how they do it. So I don't think that there is any negative side of the whole idea of putting in force such legislation.
Okay, perfect. And the second question was, what is a company risking by not respecting this new act?
Yeah, I think I made it in my contribution. I mentioned it. You can expect fines if you are not fulfilling the requirements. Of course, the German government will fine you, will suit you with 2% of your overcome. So that means it could cost at least certain things. And if it comes on the European level, if the law is developed as it's expected, you are even under risk of getting issues on certain level. For example, your risk is high. Maybe your some stakeholders sued you and put you at the court in United United States, for example, then you can expect that there is a huge amount of money coming up for the payment for the issues. Mariana, please.
Well, you see, I absolutely agree, and the heftiest fine you will get is on your reputation. That's it.
Yeah.
You lose you lose your competitiveness, you lose your customers, and you lose the trust of your employees. And these are not things we can play risky games with.
Mm.
Thank you so much. We have a last question. Michael Zerman, on the subject of liability. In my opinion, the question of responsibility under civil law has not been yet clarified in paragraph 11. Lieferketten-Sorgfaltspflichtengesetz is definitely the possibility for claims from tort law or on the basis of a contract in favor of Dritter, or with protective effect for the third parties, yeah, Dritter. Or do you see it differently according to your presentation?
Yeah, no, I don't see it differently. Of course, in paragraph 11, you can you have the description that that there is a claim which could be used as a kind of law case. But this is always the case. It's not because of this law itself. Yeah. So this is not a new thing. Maybe now he'll no. Maybe Mr. Sermon, you can agree with it that this kind of case is always possible for third party.
All right.
We have it in the international discussion already that for example NGOs take over certain responsibility of a third party and sued a company against the law. This is not related with the Lieferkettengesetz only.
Okay. All right. We are running out of time. We already ran out of time. So, and this is a wide field, and Frank already supposed to have another workshop maybe on this issue. But this was really inspiring, and thank you very much. You both, thank you very much, Professor Frank Ebinger, Nuremberg Campus of Technology, and Mariana Kellerova, Siemens. Thank you very much for your thoughts, for your knowledge, for your practical insights. I think this was a very, very great first information step for the companies here. Thanks, very big thanks also to the partners for sustainability for hosting this workshop. Thanks to the team, Martina Jackel, Jan Elger, Eva Brichtova for the technical support, very reliable. And you will hear from us. Thank you very much to you all out there for joining us today. The member companies of our chamber and all the other companies and institutions who shared today this workshop and their time with us. Thank you very much to you all, and greetings from the German Chamber of Industry and Commerce and the Partners for Sustainability. Dikimos. Dankeschön. Herzlichen Gruß nach Nürnberg.
Danke. Ciao.
Oder Mainz oder
Thank
Mainz.
you. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, bye.
Ciao.